So on Sunday we looked at the character and the person of Moses, who is utterly central to the books that we've been studying and preaching on over the last several weeks, and will continue to do so. Yet Moses is right at the epicenter of this whole story, and it's really valuable to get an idea as to what shaped him, the forces that shaped him, and also the man he became. He didn't become perfect, but he is described in Numbers chapter 12, verse 5, as the most humble man living on the face of the earth. And it's that humility is not so much arisen from self-abasement. In other words, Moses wasn't saying, I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, I'm the least of this and the least of that. In fact, he was a very assertive and capable person with a very, very high degree of training as he grew up in the court of Pharaoh. But he'd also been through processes, he'd also been through a period where he realised that he'd made quite a major mistake. He'd taken matters into his own hands, and the result was that he lost all his status, all his relationships, and probably all his money and possessions. And that resulted in a 40-year period basically chasing sheep around the Midian desert. So there's a number of lessons that we can take from the life of Moses, and it's worth considering these and figuring out how they fit into our own life story, or how indeed they can be applied. So the first of those is it does take a while for us to be transformed into the person that God wants us to be. And it's okay to be patient with ourselves while that process is taking place. I think it's very easy when one's young to want to get there quickly, because we just have this feeling that if I'm not such and such by the time I'm 25 or 30, I've really missed the bus. And in God's economy, that's just not the case. We're still learning, we're still growing, and there's still opportunities for us to be developed and shaped by God and made fit for His purposes. So that leads to the second point, which is whatever reversals we face in life, and if there haven't been any already, let me encourage you with the thought that there will be. But it's the way we react to them and the way that we allow God to work within us while we're going through some deep valley, some very, very tough set of circumstances, that has a major impact on the person that we're going to become. And we can go one of two ways. We can either walk through this in faith, or we can become very bitter and angry with what's happened. And those two reactions will take us in two very different directions. The third point that I noticed from the life of Moses is that time spent with God seems to bear a direct relationship with our personal humility. So that's not about ticking religious boxes. It's not about being very religious in the way we approach our quiet times. It's actually just using all our time with God to understand the greatness and the power and the glory and the love of God. And the more we do that, inevitably, the more humble we inevitably become. Again, not self-effacing, not putting ourselves down, but just realizing that we're utterly reliant on Him and His strength and His resources to achieve anything. And the fourth point is that no matter who we are, no matter what our social background, our educational background, whatever resources we have available to us, we're perfect as ourselves for God's purposes for us. On the one hand, we can see that there were men and women of great education who've had a major impact on the development of the church, and on the other hand, there are people with what we would regard as minimal education, still powerfully used by God. So all of that's wrapped up in the story of Moses, I believe, and enjoy taking these issues further in your discussions tonight.